Okay, so let's talk about the W-4, okay? In the upper left-hand corner, I have highlighted in yellow what the IRS gives you the permission to do with your W-4. And what it says is that you should consider completing a new form W-4 each year and when your personal or financial situation changes. Well, what personal financial changes will require you to adjust your W-4? Well, you could have children, you have more children, you could get married, you could get divorced, or you can start a business. But what the IRS is telling you is that every year you should look at your W-4 to see if you need to make any adjustments. We all know that there are a lot of people who probably haven't changed or looked at their W-4 since they started their job, and don't even realize that there's probably more allowances that they can claim if they knew how to fill the form out correctly. Another note that I wanted to mention, it is highlighted in yellow, and that is the status of head of household, okay? The only person who can claim head of household is someone who is not married, and you are paying more than 50% of the cost for anyone that is living in your home. So if you're paying more than 50% of the cost for yourself as well as your children, or maybe you have to take care of a mother or a grandparent, as long as you are paying over 50% of their living expenses, they are considered a dependent and you can claim head of household. You cannot claim head of household if you are married, and it doesn't matter if you make more money than your spouse. If you're married, you can't be head of household. Head of household has to be single. So let's go through these personal allowance worksheet, which is page 1. And to me, it's pretty self-explanatory. All you have to do is just read each line carefully, okay? So let's start with line A. It says, enter 1 for yourself if no one else can claim you as a dependent, okay? So you're gonna enter 1 for A. That's self-explanatory, okay? For line B, enter 1 if you're single and you only have one job, or if you're married, have one job, and your spouse does not work, okay? So if you're single, you're gonna put 1 on line B. If you are married and you and your wife both have a job, you're gonna put 0 for line B. Line C is where you're able to count your spouse. So on line C, you're gonna enter 1 for your spouse, regardless if they work or not, okay? Line D, enter the number of dependents that you are going to claim on your tax return. If you got 1 child, you're going to enter 1 for line D. If you got 2 kids, you're going to enter 2. If you have a child and you're taking care of your grandmother, then on line D, you're still going to enter 2. Line E, enter 1 if you will file head of household on your taxes. And I just talked about the requirements for you to be able to claim head of household. Line F, enter 1 if you have at least $2,000 in child care, daycare expenses throughout the year. Now, if you are paying someone to watch your child and they don't have a licensed daycare, they're just they're helping you out, maybe it's a relative and you kind of just paying them, but they're not reporting that income to the state or the government, then you cannot claim that as child dependent care expenses, okay? But if you are paying a licensed facility and you're paying over $2,000 in a year, you get to enter 1 in line F. Line G, which is the child tax credit, and for some people, they kind of get confused in this area. Okay, as you can see under the child tax credit, there are 2 bullet points. And those two bullet points are 2 different criteria depending on your income, okay? So for bullet point number 1, which is criteria number 1, if you make less than $70,000 a year and you're single, or if you make less than $100,000 a year and you're married, you're gonna follow criteria number 1, bullet point number 1. If you make more than $70,000 a year and you're single, or you make over $100,000 as a married couple, but no more than $119,000 as a married couple, you get to follow bullet point number 2, criteria number 2. Now, if you are married and you make over $120,000, you do not get the child tax credit. Okay. If you are single and you make over $70,000, you do not qualify for the child tax credit. Okay. So let's go through the first criteria. If you make less than $70,000, you're single, or you make less than $100,000 and you're married. Okay. It says enter 2 for each child. Okay. Less 1 if you have 2 to 4 children, less 2 if you have 5 or more children. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is, if depending on the number of children you're going to have, you're going to multiply it by 2. Okay, then depending on how many children you have, it will determine whether or not you're going to be subtracting 1 from that number, subtracting 2 from that number. Okay, so if I make less than $70,000 and I have 1 child, I am going to enter number 2 on line G. If I'm single and I have 2 children, so that's going to be 2 times 2, so that's 4. And then it says less 1 if you have 2 to 4 children. So in that case, I'm going to take 1 from the 4. So on line G, I'm going to enter 3. So let's say I got 4 children. Okay, well, if I have 4 children, that's 4 times 2, that's 8, minus 1, because I have within the threshold 2 to 4 children. So on line G, I'm going to write 7. Okay, but let's say you have a big family. Okay, maybe you make less than $70,000, but let's say you have 5 children. So that's going to be 5 times 2, so that's 10, and it says minus 2 if you have 5 or more children. So that's 10 minus 2. So on line G, you're going to enter 8. Okay, and as you can see, if your income is over $70,000, if you're married and you're making over $100,000, you only get to claim 1 for each eligible child. So basically, if you have a significant amount of income, if you got 1 child, you can put 1. If you got 2 kids, you can put 2. If you got 3 kids, you can put 3. Okay, now what you're going to do on line H is you're going to add all your numbers up from A to G, and you're going to enter that in line H. Now, what you'll notice from this form, especially for people who have a lot of children, they qualify for a lot of allowances just by reading and modifying their W-4 correctly. Because I know people right now who has 5 kids and they're only claiming 5, when really that number is significantly higher if you go through each step on the W-4. So just training people on how to do the W-4 is really critical in their ability to get more money in their paycheck so they can get out of debt or so that they can invest.